Hello everyone, welcome back to my LEC tier list. On the last episode we've talked about the bottom 5 teams and ranked them in that order. SK, Vitality and Schalke at the bad tier teams, Excel at the Excel tier, and Mad Lions as the opener for the mid tier teams. I would like to remind you of the disclaimer we've talked about in the last episode. If I say a team is good or not that great at something, it's relative to their team's tier and not for the entire league. Let's get right into it. We open our top 5 with the Misfits. The team that surprised everyone by consistently and convincingly winning games and even playing really well since the third week of LEC. Strengths. First, they have a very versatile solo laners that allow them to play most of the late game situations they get into in the optimal way. They can split push, they can team fight, they can engage, they can kite, they can TP flank, they can play weak side mapstates. Dandan and Febiven are incredible in those late game setups. Secondly, Razork is fucking insane. Since the third week, this guy is doing everything correctly. He punishes every overextending lane, he helps fix every bad wave his laners have, he can scout the enemy jungler all around the map if needed. This guy currently looks like Superman with his sidekick Danik that joins him around the map and helps him get vision control over the next targeted objective. Weaknesses. Bivo is terrible. Secondly, Razork and Danik should fall off a bit soon. Those new successful duos are usually very good at the start, but when teams are scouting them properly they fall off. For example, compare Selfmade and Dream's first half of the split last year to the second one. It seemed like they couldn't get as much plays as they did because teams have learned their style and found how to match them. Locking up Danik in the bot lane with his horrible AD carry by creating a good freeze while matching Razork's pressure there should be a good way to shut them down, for example. It will be interesting to see if they can recover from it. Lastly, Dandan is a really bad laner, and his champion pool seems very small. This guy has showed us his fine set and Vladimir, his great GP, but that's it. He didn't look good on other picks, and there are some core champions in the meta such as Aatrox and Ornn that he simply can't play. All in all, this team is really overperforming the expectations. It would be interesting to see how long they can stay in the top 4. After seeing Razork and Danik for a few weeks, it seems like a better AD carry would make this team a real contender for the top 3. Now we are entering the top team zone. Those next 4 teams should be the absolute 4 best teams by the end of the split, and I can't imagine any of those losing a best of 5 to the other 6. At 4, we have Origin. Strengths. Firstly, their drafts are really good. They are not innovating the meta from scratch like some other teams we know, but they catch up really fast and know how to draft accordingly. They generally know how to play towards and around the win conditions and power spikes their comps have. The second strength of this team is the solo laners Alphari and Nukeduck. Those guys are rock fucking solid. Even without a jungler that helps them fix their waves, they almost always manage to manipulate the wave to a point where they don't need to. They play almost everything, and they always seem to do fine. They are probably 2 of the best split pushers in the league. They never die in a side lane, and both barely have any isolated deaths. With those kinds of solo laners, all you need is a strong jungler that knows how to play around them, and Origin becomes a championship contender. Lastly, when they get a lead, from draft or from gameplay, they will win the game. Every time. This team is the most reliable one to predict after the draft phase because you know exactly what you're going to get from each one of their players and their team cohesiveness. Weaknesses. On the other hand, this team can't play early game comps because of their AFK jungler and clueless support. I'll start with Xerxes. This guy is almost exactly the same player he was 2 years ago, and it's a problem because his playstyle is only good for specific drafts or unfunctional teams. He is power farming in most of the games, and it doesn't matter if he plays Karthus or Elise. It's a bit disappointing to see that this guy didn't change his playstyle at all since the Splice days, and the team can never go for early game plays or hard stomping lanes because Xerxes and Destiny can't make acceleration plays. For example, let's look at this clip from their game versus Rogue. They have a gigantic gold lead and they need to keep accelerating the game because they have an early game comp. At the 14th minute mark, the top lane tower is the only one left up and they want to get it. Instead of staying top though, Xerxes and Destiny are moving mid, letting Larsen clear the top wave. When they are finally back top, the wave was cleared and they have to wait at least one more wave to get the tower and probably some more because they have to secure mid prio first. As for Destiny, I kinda feel bad for shitting on him, but it's necessary. He doesn't really understand important setups and general competitive support concepts that are known for most of the supports in the league. For example, roaming mid on every possible back timing. If he had a jungler that could lead him in the early game, like Cold, it could have looked much better. To summarize, this team has no jungle support presence on the map in the early games and doesn't have mid-jungle synergy at all. Luckily for them, they have 3 of the best carry role players in the league, but without a good jungler support duo, they will have a hard time playing against the top 3. The second team in the top tier, and at the third place in the LEC we have Rogue. To talk about this team, we have to break the structure of the video and start from their weaknesses. First, and most importantly, their drafts are god-awful. The amount of times I said to myself, they just got outdrafted by X and Y, for example Soraka, they learn for next time is over 9000 and there have only been 14 games. They pick strong champions that are good into their lane matchup, but they never think of team cohesiveness and general power spike time synergies. They have a lot of champion pool problems. They don't play Own, their top laner doesn't play tanks, which might be vital since 10-4, Finn's set is probably one of the worst in the league, and even Vander had yet to play trash this season, even though he had his opportunities. Secondly, they get early game leads in almost every game, but either their comp is too bad to capitalize on those leads, or they decide that teamfights and flanks is the only way to win the game. They never go for full split push setups anymore for some reason, even when they have champions that can actually do it very well. They either win teamfights or lose the game. Lastly, Inspired never plays with Larsen. I've talked about this problem even in the players to watch video from before the season. He does try to gank mid this season as opposed to last season, but if he can't get an early kill, he gives up and moves back to farm and plays towards the side lanes. The situation had gotten so severe that they have to pick Larsen stuff like Azir, Syndra and Ryze so that he can play alone in his lane. When Larsen's pick is dependent on the jungler, like when he goes for LeBlanc, Lissandra and Kiana, it usually looks pretty bad. As for their strengths, their early game seems really good. They have overall the best early game stats, gold difference at 15, CS difference at 15, first blood rates, tower control and neutral objectives control. That might be inflated because of their draft, but this is generally the hardest thing to teach, so they should be able to go to the next level with the right coaching and some new drafts. Secondly, on the rare occasion Rogue wins draft, they almost never lose. Their players are really good and their early map plays are so efficient that it's really hard to win against them when they do get an even or a better draft. This team, as opposed to Mad Lions, has the veteran voice that can guide them around in games in Vander. He is the third best support in the league in my opinion, a tier below Mickey X and Healy and a tier above the rest. Where Inspired lacks in experience and planning map setups or paths, Vander compensates. This jungler support duo works really well when they move together. To summarize, I think this is the team I'm most biased about. Their potential is so high and I can't ignore it while ranking them. The things that seem to limit them are easily fixable, and even though they couldn't fix them for the first 14 games, I hope that when they need to prepare for a best of 5, they will make the necessary preparation for the draft phase, at least. It should be said that the 10-4 meta might be a bad meta for them. As it looks right now, if tanks go back to the meta as the best picks in the solo lanes, Rogue are back out of the top 3. And now we have our top 2, the 2 absolute best teams in the league. As it looks right now, I don't think it's debatable. Their strategic pool is much wider than that of the rest, and at least 9 of those players are in the top 20 best player list of the spring split. From this point on, it's hard to talk about these teams relatively to the bottom 6, because they are much better at practically everything. I'll be comparing them between themselves and with Origin and Rogue. Let's get right into it, starting with our second best, Fnatic. Strengths. Firstly, they are the fastest team in the league. When Fnatic are ahead, it seems like they are just rolling all over you. They are probably the fastest team in the league in terms of closing out games and playing simple map states. When they get into a situation they know, they hit you hard, they hit you right and they hit you fast. They have 3 playmakers on this team, Bwipo, Healy and Selfmade. If they do manage to get an early advantage, and they usually do, they win. Secondly, their drafts are really good. They are picking some weird shit that ends up working and other teams are starting to copy them. Their drafts are terrifying because you don't know what will come next. You have a dive cop, they can pull out the Veigar. 3 mobile carries, Zac top. They were also the first to flex on to the mid lane, at least in EU. They should keep innovating, it gives them an uncounterable edge in every draft. They do tend to get cocky sometimes with the Veigar picks, forgetting that he has 0 pressure in the early game, but if they are not playing G2 or Rogue, it should still work, because no other team in the league can capitalize on that. Now for their weaknesses. Healy and Reckless are playing worse than last year, which makes the team really dependent on Selfmade or Bwipo popping off as the 2 more reliable players, and it's really weird to say that on Bwipo. Healy kinda ints it more often than not this split. It seems like he's back to his coin flipping ways and not for the D20 with the critical fails sometimes that we've seen last year. I do think that we will see him ramping up from this point as we get closer to playoffs, but right now he is not looking that good. The reckless angle is the weird one to me, as he already had more than one fight where he died with his summoners up when he absolutely shouldn't have. Maybe he's playing less solo queue, maybe Aphelios takes too much brain space, but it had never happened to him in his career with such consistency. If I had to guess, he will go back to his old form as well, but it is a worrying trend. Secondly, this team has the fight syndrome. It's like the Lee syndrome but with engaging fights. Even when they play a scaling composition, it seems like they can never give up a fight for a Drake or a Herald. For example, in the G2 game, where they clearly had the late game comp, they have decided to contest Drakes that are not even soul point and give G2 a big enough lead to close out the game. They could have just waited and scaled, but they have decided to int it. And it happened more than once this split. Lastly, the Fnatic crew is not very creative when it comes to late game upstates. If they get into the late game without an advantage from draft or from their early game, they are relying either on a sneaky Baron or on the enemy team making a big mistake to win the games. G2, for example, are playing the map and the waves in a way that gives them gold advantages and tempo advantages, which they are snowballing into bigger leads and neutrals. Fnatic are not able to do that generally. For the best team in EU, we of course have G2. They do seem a bit shaky lately, but after being so dominant for so long, they get the benefit of the doubt. Even so, they have showed us some major weaknesses that we will soon discuss. The strengths of G2 are familiar because everyone has been talking about them for more than a year, so I'll keep it short. They are the smartest team in Europe. Even in their losses, their map play is so smart. They are so annoying to play against because you can lose at every single point of the game. They are unexpected and fast thinkers, which make them one of the most dangerous teams in the world. Secondly, they have the best players in the league. They have the best top laner together with Alphari, the best jungler, the best mid laner, and the best support in the league. Now for their weaknesses. First, Perkz is not versatile. He is very uncomfortable when he is not getting funneled or while playing a supportive type champion. G2 did not win again this split when Perkz had lost lane. It's not just that the other players are underperforming, the man is taking everything for himself to try and get back into those games, and no one else can really carry. In 2019 G2, if someone had a bad game, you had 2 more carries in your team. This year, with the tank Soraka meta and the role swap, it seems like if Perkz doesn't carry, G2 just lose. The blame can go either to him or to the other players on the team. Perkz is playing almost solely for his lane kingdom and calls Mickey and Jankos all the time. He demands they play around him. When he roams, it's usually on very comfortable timings and to get himself ahead. Caps was sacrificing himself sometimes last year to get Perkz and Wonder ahead. Perkz doesn't do that. As for Caps, he is not that great of an AD carry yet. His strengths as a player in the mid lane were not suitable for the AD carry role, and he does take his time adjusting to it. He is making crucial mistakes on bot lane waves and makes Mickey stay bot to help him fix it. He doesn't seem to know how to play versus some of the bot lane champions or as an AD carry versus some champions, such as versus Rakan or versus Lee Sin, and he ints teamfights a lot. He is missing the playmaking and independence the mid lane role had to offer, as opposed to the AD carry role. It should be said though that Perkz wasn't that great either at the same time last year, so we will have to wait and see. Wonder isn't getting resources from the team. Not in drafts and not in the games. Jankos and Perkz are rarely moving top, especially not for acceleration ganks. He almost always gets Aatrox as the first top laner picked in the draft. The other champions he played are either things like Soraka and Sona or Ornn. Wonder isn't being put in a position to carry the games, so he of course can't do it. It's hard to say if it's his or a general team/coaching problem, but they could and should try to play around this guy because he is a monster carry player. These problems are making G2 seem like a very one-dimensional team because Perkz is the only carry this team has this season. The scariest trait of 2019 G2 was their versatility in their players' ability to carry. Craps is here, Perkz carries. Enemy team sits bot, Wonder carries. Claps is destroying mid lane, it's clapping time. This year, they have a single carry. This team seems way more like a better version of 2018 G2 than 2019 G2, which was one of the best teams the world has ever seen at times. Alright, that's it. Let me know what you thought of this list in the comments below. Check out my channel for more videos that I have done, and subscribe to get notified about next week's What Did We See in the LEC.